I was standing in the rain outside the coffee shop where we first met, watching him through the window as he laughed with someone new, and I realized with devastating clarity that some people don't know what they have until it walks away forever. The woman sitting across from him had her hand on his arm, and he was smiling that smile I thought he'd reserved only for me. My heart didn't just break in that moment, it shattered into pieces so small I wasn't sure I'd ever find them all. 3 months had passed since I'd walked out of his apartment with my dignity barely intact, since I'd decided that loving someone who took me for granted was slowly killing the person I used to be. And now, here I was, torturing myself with glimpses of the life he was living without me, wondering if leaving had been the biggest mistake of my life or the bravest thing I'd ever done. If you believe in second chances, in the power of love to transform us, and in fighting for what truly matters, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you more stories that touch the heart. My name is Maya Richardson, and I'd spent 3 years of my life loving Ethan Carter with everything I had. We'd met on a Tuesday afternoon in October at a small coffee shop in downtown Portland, Oregon. I'd been working on my graduate thesis, papers spread across an entire table, when he'd approached me with that confident smile and asked if he could share the space. He was charming and funny, with dark hair that always looked perfectly messy and green eyes that seemed to see right through to my soul. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Within months, I'd moved into his apartment in the Pearl District, convinced I'd found the person I was meant to spend forever with. But somewhere between the passionate beginning and the comfortable routine of year 3, Ethan had stopped seeing me. Not literally. Of course, I was still there every morning and every night, still cooking dinners he'd eat while scrolling through his phone, still trying to start conversations he'd interrupt with work calls or texts from his friends. I'd become background noise in my own relationship, a fixture as unremarkable as the furniture. He'd cancel our plans at the last minute for drinks with colleagues. He'd forget the little things that used to matter. My favorite flowers, the anniversary of our first date, the way I took my coffee. When I tried to talk to him about feeling invisible, he'd dismiss my concerns with a quick kiss on the forehead and a promise that things would get better once his work project was finished, once the busy season ended, once life calmed down. But life never calmed down, and I never became a priority. The breaking point came on a Saturday night in late September. We'd had reservations at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary, a place with candles on every table and a view of the Willamette River that made you believe in magic. I'd spent hours getting ready, wearing the blue dress he'd once said made me look like I'd stepped out of a dream. I'd waited at that table for 90 minutes, watching couples around me share intimate moments while I smiled apologetically at the waiter who kept refilling my water glass with increasingly pitying looks. Ethan finally answered my 7th call just as I was settling the bill for the glass of wine I'd nursed alone. He'd forgotten, completely forgotten. He was at a buddy's place watching a football game and hadn't even looked at his phone. The apology he offered was casual, distracted, as if standing me up was a minor inconvenience rather than the final crack in my already broken heart. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't scream or throw things or demand explanations. I simply started packing my belongings with a calm that surprised even me. Ethan came home around midnight to find me loading boxes into my car, and the confusion on his face would have been almost funny if it hadn't hurt so much. He'd asked what I was doing, genuinely perplexed, as if the answer wasn't obvious. When I told him I was leaving, that I couldn't keep loving someone who'd forgotten how to love me back, he'd laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being dramatic, that I was overreacting to one missed dinner. That's when I'd finally found my voice. I told him it wasn't about one dinner. It was about 1,000 small moments where he'd chosen everything and everyone else over me. It was about feeling lonelier in his presence than I'd ever felt alone. It was about loving myself enough to walk away from someone who'd stopped valuing what we had. I'd left that night and moved into my best friend Sarah's spare room, blocking his number and deleting our photos from my phone because looking at them felt like drowning. The first month was agony. I'd wake up reaching for him, forgetting for those first cruel seconds that he was gone. I'd see couples holding hands on the street and have to duck into stores to hide my tears. I'd written him 1,000 unsent messages, deleted them all, and hated myself for still wanting him despite everything. But slowly, painfully, I'd started to rebuild. I'd focused on finishing my thesis in education policy. I'd started running again, joined a book club, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during those years of making Ethan my entire world. I'd remembered who Maya Richardson was when she wasn't defined by someone else's attention or lack thereof, which brought me back to that rainy November evening, standing outside the coffee shop where our story began, watching him with someone new. I should have walked away. I should have gone home and counted my blessings that I'd escaped before wasting any more years on someone so carelessly cruel. Instead, I stood there in the cold rain, water soaking through my jacket, until Ethan happened to glance toward the window and our eyes met. The recognition on his face was immediate, followed by something I couldn't quite read, shock maybe, or regret. The woman across from him said something, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. I turned and started walking, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I heard the coffee shop door open behind me, heard him calling my name, but I kept walking faster. His footsteps splashed through puddles as he ran after me, and when his hand caught my arm, I spun around with all the anger I'd been holding inside for 3 months. He looked different. Thinner, maybe, with circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair was too long, his shirt wrinkled, and there was something desperate in his expression that I'd never seen during all our time together. When he spoke, his voice was rough, breaking on my name. He told me he'd been looking for me everywhere, that he'd gone to Sarah's apartment a dozen times, but she wouldn't let him near me, that he'd been calling from different numbers, hoping I'd pick up, that seeing me just now had felt like being able to breathe again after months of suffocating. I asked him about the woman in the coffee shop, proud that my voice didn't shake. He looked confused for a moment, then understanding flooded his features. His sister, he said. His sister Rachel, who'd moved to Portland from Boston 2 weeks ago, who'd been helping him understand exactly how badly he'd destroyed the best thing in his life. I wanted to believe him, wanted to so badly it scared me. But I'd spent too long protecting my heart to let it be broken again so easily. That's when Ethan did something he'd never done in all our years together. He started crying, real tears streaming down his face mixing with the rain, his voice breaking as he told me he'd been the biggest fool who ever lived. He said that losing me had taught him what he should have known all along, that I'd been his home in his heart, and he'd been too blind and stupid and selfish to see it. He talked about the therapy he'd started, about the work he'd done to understand why he'd taken me for granted, about the man he was trying to become because the man he'd been didn't deserve someone like me. He wasn't asking me to take him back, he said. He knew he had no right to ask for anything. He just needed me to know that losing me had changed him in ways he couldn't fully explain, that every day without me had been a lesson in appreciating what he'd casually thrown away. If this story is touching your heart, if you've ever loved someone who needed to lose you to learn your worth, please show your support by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this message today. I wanted to stay angry. I wanted to protect myself from the possibility of being hurt again. But standing there in the rain, looking at this broken version of the man I'd loved, I saw something genuine I'd never seen before. Real remorse, actual understanding, the kind of transformation that comes from genuine pain and self-reflection. I told him I couldn't just forget 3 years of feeling invisible, that loving him had nearly cost me my own identity. He nodded, accepting every word like he deserved it, and said he understood if I couldn't forgive him, but he was going to spend however long it took showing me through actions, not words, that he'd finally learned what it meant to truly love someone. Over the next 3 months, Ethan fought for me in ways I'd never imagined. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with consistency and presence. He showed up at my new apartment every Sunday morning with my favorite coffee and bagels, sitting on the front steps, if I wouldn't let him in, leaving handwritten notes about specific moments he remembered. The time I'd stayed up all night helping him prepare for a presentation. The way I'd held his mother's hand at his father's funeral. The 1,000 small kindnesses he'd overlooked while I was giving them. He started attending the book club I'd joined, sitting quietly in the back and listening to me discuss novels he'd actually read in preparation. He wrote me letters, real pen and paper letters, analyzing his own failures with brutal honesty and outlining the specific changes he was making in therapy. He never pressured me for answers or timelines. He simply showed up day after day, proving through action that he'd meant every word he'd said in the rain. Before we reach the end of Maya and Ethan's journey, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us, do you believe people can truly change? Have you ever given someone a second chance? Your stories matter to us. On Valentine's Day, 6 months after I'd walked out of his apartment, I finally invited Ethan inside. We talked for 8 hours straight about everything we'd done wrong, about the people we'd been and the people we wanted to become. I told him about the fear that still lived in my chest, the terror of becoming invisible again. He listened without interrupting, without defending himself, and then he made me a promise that if I gave him another chance, he would spend every single day making sure I knew how valued I was, that he would never again take for granted the gift of my love. I didn't say yes that night, but I didn't say no either. I told him we could start over, slowly, as two people learning each other from the beginning. We could date properly this time, build something on foundation of mutual respect rather than just passion. He agreed immediately, relief and hope flooding his features in equal measure. It's been 2 years since that rainy night outside the coffee shop, and I can honestly say that Ethan Carter is not the man I left. He's better, more present, more intentional, more committed to being a true partner rather than just a passenger in our relationship. He remembers the small things now. He protects our time together like it's sacred. He's learned that love isn't just a feeling but a choice you make every single day in 1,000 small actions that say you matter to me. And I've learned that sometimes people need to lose everything to understand its value, that second chances can lead to something even more beautiful than first chances, if both people are willing to do the real work of growth and change. Last week, Ethan proposed to me in that same coffee shop where we first met, where I'd watched him through the window and thought I'd lost him forever. The ring was simple and perfect, but it was his words that made me cry, a promise that he would spend the rest of his life making sure I never again doubted how completely loved I was. And as I said yes, I realized that our story isn't about him losing me or even about him winning me back. It's about two imperfect people who learned the hard way that love requires presence, attention, and the courage to change when change is needed. It's about understanding that the people we love deserve our best selves, not our leftover attention. And it's about the truth that sometimes breaking apart is the only way to rebuild something stronger, more honest, and infinitely more real.